On May 25, 1968, the day before her 11th birthday, Mary Bell strangled 4-year-old Martin Brown in an upstairs bedroom of a derelict house located at 85 St. Margaret's Road. In the 1960s, Newcastle upon Tyne, England, experienced a huge urban renewal project. Many inner villages of the city saw Victorian-era terrace slums demolished in order that modern houses and flats could be constructed. 85 St. Margaret's Road was one of these houses. Brown's body was found by 3 children at approximately 3:30 p.m. He was lying on his back with his arms above his head. Aside from specks of blood around his lips, no signs of injury were visible upon his body. A local man named John Hall soon arrived on the scene. He attempted to perform CPR. But it was no use. Brown was already too far gone. As Hall attempted CPR, 2 local girls, 10-year-old Mary Bell, and her 13-year-old friend and neighbor, Norma Bell, appeared at the doorway to the bedroom. Both were quickly told to leave the house. The 2 knocked on the door of Martin's aunt, Rita Finley, and informed her, "One of your sister's kids has just had an accident. We think it's Martin, but we can't tell because there's blood all over him," the 2 girls stated. The very next day, May the 26th, which was also Mary's 11th birthday, the 2 girls broke into and vandalized a nursery in nearby Woodland Crescent. The 2 entered the nursery through the roof. They ripped up books, flipped over desks, and smeared ink and poster paints all over the walls and floors of the nursery, causing a lot of damage. The next day, staff discovered the break-in and vandalism and immediately called the cops, who also discovered 4 separate notes that claimed responsibility for Martin Brown's slaying. One of these notes stated, "I am word so that I may come back." Another read, "We did N-word Martin Brown F of you bastards." A third note simply read, "F off we M-word. Watch out Fanny." And other profanity that I can't state on here. The final note was the most complex, reading, "You are mice." Why? Because we M-word Martin Brown. You better look out. And the rest I can't repeat on here. The police dismissed this incident as a tasteless and childish prank. 2 days later, on May the 29th, shortly before Martin Brown's funeral, in a game of chicken, both girls called the house of his mother, asking to see her son. When June Brown replied that they couldn't see her son because he was deceased, Mary then replied, "Oh, I know he's dead. I want to see him in his coffin." On the afternoon of July the 31st of 1968, a 3-year-old named Brian Howe was last seen by his parents in the street outside his house playing with one of his siblings, the family dog, and Mary Bell and Norma Bell. When he didn't come back home later that afternoon, concerned family and friends searched the streets without luck. At 11:10 p.m., a search party discovered Brian's body between 2 large concrete blocks upon the Tin Lizzie. The first officer to arrive said that a deliberate attempt had been made to hide the body, which was covered in grass and weeds. Cyanosis was evident upon the child's lips, and several bruises and scratches were seen upon his neck. A pair of broken scissors lay by his feet. The coroner would come to the conclusion that Brian had died of strangulation, and that he had been gone for up to 7.5 hours before his discovery. The killer had squeezed Brian's nostrils closed with one hand as he or she had gripped his throat with the other. Numerous puncture wounds had been inflicted to the child's legs before death. Sections of his hair had been cut off from his head, his genitals had been partially mutilated, and an attempt had been made to carve the initial M into his stomach area. The relatively small amount of force used to murder the child led the coroner to conclude the killer had to be another child. Numerous gray and maroon fibers were discovered upon Brian's clothing and shoes. These fibers did not source from any clothing within the Howe household, and had been transferred to the child by his killer. The discovery of Brian Howe's body sparked a large-scale manhunt. Over 100 detectives from across Northumberland were assigned to the investigation, and more than 1,200 children had been questioned with regard to their whereabouts by August 2nd. On August the 1st, detectives questioned Mary Bell and Norma Bell, who, witnesses informed investigators, had been seen playing with Brian shortly before he was believed to have died. In her initial interview, Norma seemed excitable, whereas Mary was markedly more observant. Although both girls were evasive and contradictory in their initial statements, they freely admitted to having played with Brian on the date of his death, but denied having seen him after lunchtime. But detectives weren't buying the girls' story. And that was most likely due to the girls' earlier interview with police months prior. Because just a few months before the slaying, the girls were involved in another incident. On Saturday, May the 11th, 1968, a 3-year-old boy was discovered wandering dazed and bleeding in the vicinity of St. Margaret's Road, Scotswood. The child later told his parents and police he had been playing with Mary Bell and Norma Bell atop a disused air raid shelter when he had been pushed 7 feet from the roof to the ground, inflicting a severe laceration to his head. He was unsure of which one of the girls had actually pushed him. The same evening, the parents of 3 small girls contacted police to complain that both Mary and Norma had attempted to strangle their children as they played in a sandpit. Later that day, both girls were interviewed about the incidents. Both girls denied any part in the air raid shelter incident, claiming they had simply discovered the child, bleeding heavily from his head, after he had fallen. Further questioning about the attempted strangulation of the 3 young girls, Mary denied any knowledge of the incident. But that was not the case for Norma, who admitted Mary had tried to choke each of the girls. Stating, Mary went to one of the girls and said, "What happens if you choke someone? Do they die?" Then Mary put both hands round the girl's throat and squeezed. The girl started to go purple. I told Mary to stop, but she wouldn't. Then she put her hands around Pauline's throat, and she started going purple as well. Another girl, Susan Cornish, came up and Mary did the same thing to her. Police knew of the incidents and of Mary's violent nature, but due to their age, both girls were simply given a warning. And that was the end of it. On August the 4th, Norma Bell's parents contacted police, stating their daughter wished to confess what she knew of the death of Brian Howe. DCI Dobson arrived at their home. Norma was then asked what she knew. Norma went on to tell Dobson Mary had taken her to a spot on the Tin Lizzie, where she seen the body of Brian Howe. Norma was horrified. Mary had then shown her how she had strangled the child. According to Norma's statement, Mary had confessed to her she had enjoyed strangling the child, then explained how she had inflicted the scour marks to his stomach with a razor blade. A pair of broken scissors and the razor blade had been hidden at the crime scene. Norma then led detectives to the crime scene and revealed the location where the razor blade was hidden. Detectives then asked Norma to make a sketch of what the wounds inflicted to the boy's abdomen. And her sketch precisely matched the wounds described by the coroner. Detectives then paid Mary Bell a visit at her home on August the 5th. On this occasion, she was notably defensive when confronted with the holes in her last statement. She then told detectives, "You're trying to brainwash me. I will get a solicitor to get me out of this," she yelled in anger. Later the same day, Norma was questioned again. This time, she made a full statement, admitting she was present when Mary had strangled Brian. According to Norma, when the trio were alone on the Tin Lizzie, she said that Mary seemed to go all funny, pushing the child into the grass and attempting to strangle him before stating to her, "My hands are getting thick. Take over, would ya?" Scared, Norma then ran from the scene, leaving Mary alone with Brian. A forensic examination of clothing owned by both girls revealed the gray fibers discovered upon Brian's body were a precise match to a woolen dress owned by Mary. The maroon fibers upon the child's shoes were a precise match to a skirt owned by Norma. Furthermore, the same gray fibers had also been found upon the body of Martin Brown. Brian Howe was buried in a local cemetery on August the 7th of 1968 in a beautiful funeral ceremony attended by over 200 people. According to DCI Dobson, who had planned to arrest both girls later that day, Mary Bell stood outside the Howe household as the child's coffin was brought from the home at the beginning of the funeral procession. Dobson stated. She stood there, laughing and rubbing her hands. I thought, my God, I've got to bring her in. She'll do it again. Both girls were formally charged with the slayings of Brian Howe at 8 p.m. that evening. In response to this charge, Mary replied, That's all right by me. But Norma Bell reacted quite different. Norma burst into tears, simply proclaiming, I never. I'll pay you back for this, she yelled with tears in her eyes. In custody, Mary prepared a written statement in which she admitted to being present when Brian Howe was attacked, but insisting the crime had been committed by Norma, and Norma alone. She also admitted she and Norma had broken into the Woodland Crescent nursery the day after the killing of Martin Brown, defacing the property before the two had written the 4 handwritten notes. The trial of Mary Bell and Norma Bell for the murders of Martin Brown and Brian Howe began at Newcastle Assizes on December the 5th of 1968. Both girls were tried before Mr. Justice Cusack and a jury, and both pleaded not guilty to the charges. Mary was defended by Harvey Robson, and Norma defended by R.P. Smith. The trial lasted 9 days. On December the 17th, the jury took a recess to figure out their verdict, and would deliberate for 3 hours and 25 minutes before reaching their verdicts. Mary Bell was cleared of the greater charge, but convicted of the manslaughter of both boys on the grounds of diminished responsibility. Norma Bell was acquitted of all charges. Upon hearing the jury's verdicts, Norma clapped her hands in excitement, whereas Mary burst into tears. The judge, Mr. Justice Cusack, described Bell as a dangerous individual, adding she posed a very grave risk to other children, and that steps must be taken to protect the public from her. So the judge sentenced her to life imprisonment. At the time of Bell's manslaughter convictions, she was only the young age of 11 and a half, making her Britain's youngest female killer to this very day. So how do you feel about Britain's youngest female capable of the ultimate crime? Do you feel like justice was served? Do you feel like Norma should have been convicted of the crimes also? Leave your opinions about this case in the comments below. Hey guys. If you made it this far in the video, thank you. And if mystery and true crime is the kind of content you are into, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, cause we post up to 4 times a week. So, until the next video, be safe and be kind. Bye.